game sector is one of the more interesting bits of the technology spectrum. It's a very high margin business, really good profits, but it's also an industry that's undergoing a lot of disruption at the moment. How do you approach the gaming sector now? It's obviously an interesting turning point.
Yeah, I mean, you're alluding to the idea that Google recently came out and talked about streaming or gaming as a service. The idea that the cloud, that the internet can be used as a delivery mechanism, and the compute being done somewhere else. And then, much like when you watch Netflix or the BBC iPlayer, you can just stream the game.
And arguably that's been around for a while with Steam, for instance.
It's not dissimilar to the idea of Steam. So the idea here is that there's a new entrant coming, and could they disrupt the profit? So, I mean, just to back up a bit, I'd say the gaming market is one of the most exciting markets, and it's been economically fundamentally altered by the fact that now we are connected when we play games. What was something you did on your own or with your friends in the front room on your Atari console, if you're old enough to remember, that iteration of gaming has given way to a mass adopted form of entertainment stroke leisure. Think about how you think about that is up to you. That has been an incredible place for us to invest. Companies that have got huge franchises are very hard to replicate, and so we are investors in a number of companies in the gaming domain. So there are a couple of things that we're mindful of. The first one is this concept of streaming, as you've said, and our own experience of what's happened, say, in TV and in music is that my own personal view here is that new distribution models often challenge the existing value of content. By which I mean that now as a Netflix customer, I am watching some premium content from the old days, but I'm also watching a whole bunch of new content that didn't exist before. Perhaps it's content that Netflix created. If you think about the impact that music has had, or I should say streaming has had on the music industry.
So your argument then is that overall though, we're just using a lot more content. We're just doing a lot more gaming, using a lot more content.
We consume a lot more. We find new use cases for music, new use cases for video, but the volume growth isn't necessarily enjoyed by the incumbent content makers. And obviously as an investor in companies like an Activision or a Nintendo, you are a believer that the content that those companies create is unique and monetizable. So I'm mindful that there are always opportunities associated with new distribution models, and there are also pitfalls associated with it. The other thing that you have to be also alive to is the phenomena that is Fortnite. And I have two boys, although it could be two girls, but my two boys are mad about Fortnite, and they haven't wanted me to buy them a new game for a long time. It's the first really successful console game that's been free and monetized. Let's be careful what we mean by free. Free on the front end, you don't have to pay for the game.
Plenty on the.
But as you play the game and as you spend more of your life in the game and immerse yourself in that game, you want to be monetized. You want to be able to personalize your characters. You want to stand out in a world where everyone's playing the same game. And so I remain pretty positive about the whole gaming story. I think if you look at the demographics, young people don't listen to the radio, they don't care about broadcast television, they do care about the smartphones, they do care about those things, they also do care about gaming. And so I think as a long-term investor, we're going to remain favourable towards gaming, but there may be a bit more choppiness as these kind of new models get ingratiated into the gaming market.
You mentioned earlier on Nintendo, which of course makes both games and does hardware, and that's been certainly a kind of dominant model, hasn't it? Hardware and gaming software sort of linked together, and that allows high operating margin. Do you think that connection between, particularly with the internet arriving, that's going to break down that connection between hardware and software, that we're just going to see software only?
I don't know. I think there probably is another console cycle left. I think that when the PS4 and the Xbox One came out some years ago, there was an assumption, or certainly in some quarters, that was the last console. I'm not sure we're there yet. I think when you look at what the minimum specs are required in order for you to do a streaming as a service, it's pretty high. You need to have a very strong, fast internet connection, and that will preclude a lot of people from being able to take that service. And so I suspect that what you'll see is, like we see often in technologies, you'll find a new distribution model like streaming, but there'll be it will complement the existing, which is of course a piece of hardware. Connected to the internet. And so I think we'll have another games console cycle. The question, though, is still a very good one, which is that right now, of course, the reason I would have thought that Google and others would look to disintermediate the likes of Sony and potentially Microsoft that are the dominant suppliers. I mean, Nintendo is a distant number 3. the reason for that, of course, is that those companies with those platforms are able to take a percentage of the monies that are being spent on the likes of Fortnite. And so the in-gaming transactions that have really formed the most lucrative part of this industry are today captured by those hardware vendors. And I suspect Google and others would like a piece of that action. So it's a really interesting time. I still think we're still some years away though.